Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. This is Mark Gray. I'm live from Normandy, France on Freedom UFOs and the Project Camelot web TV channel. And this is live in Florida as well with our guest tonight, the very Honorable Dr. Ruggero Maria Santilli, who's live from Tarpon Springs in Florida. And he is my guest tonight. He was nominated for the Peace Nobel Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize, sorry, and he was also a PhD. He has a PhD in mathematics and physics, and holds a chair in nuclear physics at the Institute in Turin, in '67. And he was also a visiting scientist at MIT, and a member of the Department of Mathematics at Harvard. He has such a resume in his background, and I will let him introduce himself, but he's going to talk to us tonight about some very fascinating topics. The first one will be basically the Isodual Santilli Telescope and with the concave lens, and he will be talking about the invisible universe and entities that he's able to detect that we can't see with our own eyes, and he will also tell us about his UFO encounter and the UFO propulsion systems that he has been able to come up with, and also measurements of time anomalies during UFO encounters, and of course, very important, the new energy applications from his hadronic science. Dr. Santilli, welcome to the show. How are you feeling today?
It is a great pleasure and a privilege indeed, and you have my sincere appreciation.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. It's pretty tough to get you an interview, in public interview. I think this is your first Skype video interview of your life, I believe.
That is correct. I had numerous interviews, by phone or in person, or at the TV studio, but not by Skype. This is my first, so I'm learning. I'm learning as you conduct your interview. But again, thank you for this opportunity.
I'm honored to have you on for the first time, and this is our 10th show actually on Freedom UFO and the Project Camelot web TV channel. And tell us a little bit about your background. I've described what I know about you, and maybe you can tell us a bit more about your background from Italy to the U.S. and how you ended up with all those research and development that you've accomplished throughout the years, and all the prizes that you've won.
Thank you. But very briefly, I was born in Italy, and I conducted all my studies in Italy up to the highest possible level in mathematics and physics. Is correct. I had a chair in nuclear physics at Avogadro Institute in Turin. When I'm sorry. When, in view of the very advanced, if I may say so, character of my studies during my PhD studies in physics, I was invited in 1967 from the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida, and with NASA support, because I had made a certain investigation on irreversible processes that were of potential interest to NASA. So we came to America with my wife and a little daughter for 6 months. We never came back to Italy except for vacationing and visiting our relatives. We loved America. We saw the enormous possibilities for research. And from the University of Miami, then I went many years as a professor of physics at Boston University. And then I worked 4 years at MIT, and then several years at Harvard University under a number of grants from the Department of Energy, precisely to study new energy. The Department of Energy gave me the task to study reversibility, leading toward basically new energy that we cannot touch today. But who knows, maybe in another interview or we can discuss it. And that's essential. After that, I assumed the position of president of the Institute for Basic Research that I still keep today. And then in 2002, I formed a publicly traded company, Magnegas Corporation, which was the industrial outcome of my mathematical and theoretical and experimental work. And I brought this company all the way to NASDAQ. I was invited to ring the bell at NASDAQ, the NASDAQ building in Times Square. I had the big honor one of the biggest honor of my life to see my picture as tall as 20-story high in Times Square at the NASDAQ building. It was a great moment of And after that, I left Magnegas Corporation because I had finished my work as a scientist, and we formed a new public company, Thunder Energies Corporation, which is a publicly traded company with stock symbol TNRG, Thomas, Nancy, Robert, George. Everything that I am presenting now, all intellectual property, patents, patent application, domain names, is all owned by Thunder Energy Corporation. And the division on optical instruments is an excellent source for scientific papers published in referee journal, as well as description accessible to the general public. And that's essentially it.
That's pretty impressive. That's a pretty impressive background. I can identify with you and how you can get easily hooked on Florida, because I myself I was there, lived and worked there for 14 years. So as a French guy, so I was back to France I came back in 2003. But prior to that, I did really enjoyed the Florida life. Anyway, Normandy is a big climate and weather gap with Florida. You know, it rains a lot here. What I wanted to say is that how did you come from your discoveries in experimenting the evidence on the lack of expansion of the universe? Your discoveries in antimatter galaxies, antimatter cosmic rays, and antimatter asteroids. How did you go from those discoveries to your Isodual telescope with concave lens that allows you and us to see the invisible universe and entities and make them visible?
Thank you for the question. I have to break it down to two parts, but let me start with concentrate on antimatter to begin with, and then eventually we can make the connection with other fields. But let me go back to my PhD studies in the mid-60s. We're talking about 50 years ago to the point. And I became interested to know whether a faraway galaxy that you can see with a powerful telescope, I want to know whether that galaxy is made up of matter or of antimatter. It was a very simple question, but that intrigued me dramatically and pushed me more and more into research in the field. And after 50 years of intense study in the field, after mathematical, theoretical, experimental, and now industrial application, I can only say that we can objectively, we have only scratched the surface of this new field because the complexity of the universe are beyond human imagination.
Yes, and this antimatter. Can you describe what antimatter is to our audience here tonight?
That is a very difficult, it's a magnificent but very difficult question. I can describe antimatter in a sort of indirect way. I cannot say honestly that I understand antimatter. It will be presumption on my part. The same for quantum mechanics. I know how to operate an infinite dimensional Hilbert space, but I cannot claim, will be arrogant and vulgar for me to say I understand an infinite dimensional Hilbert space of quantum mechanics. No, I don't. It's mostly the same thing with antimatter. The best way to try to understand, to have a glimpse of what antimatter is by examining together the most important experimental evidence on antimatter, which is annihilation. When matter and antimatter touch each other, they annihilate. Namely, the entirety of the masses for both matter and antimatter is turned into light. So this is a majestic event, is one of the most powerful events in nature. By comparison, the atomic bomb is a little thing, because in the atomic bomb and the nuclear weapons, we use a small fraction of the mass. There is the totality of the mass is converted, so it is a very majestic. Now, here is the key point. For matter and antimatter to annihilate, namely to disappear from the universe in their current form of mass and remain in the universe as light, then they must have necessarily opposite characteristics. So every characteristic of matter must be opposite for antimatter. This is the case for energy. Let's go back in 1932, British Nobel Prize, Paul Dirac conceived antimatter as having a negative energy. Later on, perhaps we can discuss it in more detail. But so antimatter must have a negative energy, because matter has positive energy, then positive and negative energy, you have the foundation for annihilation, but that's not enough. Also,
we know magnets somehow. They work like magnets.
Opposite, but they enter inside each other and they disappear from the universe. They are converted in something else, into light. They are converted into light. But also time. We know now that antimatter must evolve in time backward with respect to us. And more generally, this is a mathematical statement. Unless all the characteristics of antimatter, with no exception, are opposite to those of matter, you don't get annihilation. You are unable to represent an annihilation. So it's a mysterious word, a very, very mysterious, fascinating word, and that, as we will see more details, hopefully in a few minutes, is a word that we cannot see with our eyes. However, yes, we can see with appropriate instruments.
Right, we cannot see with our own eyes, but we can see cosmic events in the universe, in our galaxy, for example, or with the Galileo telescope, we can see events that have happened thousands of years or millions of years before, right?
Yes.
With the lights being displayed.
Yes, and with our telescope, we see the corresponding events, but events made of antimatter, because our telescope is unable to see any matter episode.
Right.
And vice versa. Galileo cannot see antimatter, and vice versa, our cannot see matter.
Right. So they're perfect for each other, actually.
They complement each other, yes.
Complement each other, totally. What you think that Earth has been hit by antimatter asteroids, for example?
Thank you for asking this question. I really appreciate it. It's a very, very important subject. One of the reasons why I've dedicated decades of studies of antimatter against my personal interest, because I had all sorts of opposition in academia, so it was done against my personal interest. I did it for what I call societal accountability, namely our need that we scientists have to be accountable to our society. We have to take care of our society. It is our job. The answer to your important question is yes. Our Earth has been not only hit, has been devastated in the past by a number of antimatter asteroids. The most famous of them is the so-called Tunguska explosion in Siberia in 1908. I wonder whether the producer can display the picture of the Tunguska. I can see that. Yes. Okay. Now, what happened? What is the evidence that we know? Is that there was an enormous explosion seen in different continents in the sky of the Siberia. An area presumed to be bigger than the entire New England was flattened with no crater whatsoever. At the center, at the epicenter, the trees were still standing up, and all the other trees were knocked down. The interpretation, or academic interpretation, is that this was caused by an ice comet. An ice comet. I strongly objected. This is done because of political reasons that I would like to elaborate and I strongly recommend fellow listeners to have their own independent mind. Why so? Because it is a political stand to maintain Einstein theory when it doesn't belong, when it has never been formulated for. Let's look at the evidence. 2 days after the Tunguska explosion, this is evidence fully recorded and available in the internet. You do a search on the Tunguska explosion, you see them all. 2 days later, in Sydney, Australia, which is the opposite side of Siberia, people could read newspaper at midnight without any artificial light. Wow. All over the world. 2 days later, people could read the newspaper without artificial light. What does it mean? This means that the entire Earth atmosphere was ultra excited. Now, an ice comet can do that, ladies and gentlemen. say to my fellow academician colleague, please tell it to somebody else. Don't tell to me, because if you present it as a truth, you will receive a treatment, a special treatment. No, evidence is the opposite. No, the only the scientific possibility to explain this enormous excitation of the entire Earth atmosphere are two. Either an enormous nuclear explosion, the Earth would have exploded, the whole Earth would have gone, or an antimatter asteroid annihilating in our atmosphere, because the annihilation implies the emission of very, very strong radiation of all frequency. And we know that as a result of the annihilation, there is indeed the production of, it's like fluorescence, the air becomes like fluorescence. Now here is the point of accountability, I call societal accountability. We have the duty we scientists have the duty to study the possibility of antimatter, the existence of antimatter asteroids, because in the event, unforeseeable event, that Europe and or Russia or America is hit by an antimatter asteroid just the size of a football, small, this I can assure you that then in this case, all civilian, industrial, and military communication will be disrupted, will be terminated for days. So that's what I call societal accountability. We cannot play with the ice comet, with something. So now, especially as we enter a little bit more in our presentation, you ask me, can we detect now an antimatter asteroid? My flat answer is no. I do not know whether our light, which is light belonging to matter, is even may be absorbed by an antimatter asteroid approaching Earth. Or I don't know whether it's absorbed, or because it's antimatter, or it is, I don't know whether it can be reflected. Reflection occurs for light hitting matter. For antimatter, light hitting antimatter, I do not know. I am a scientist. I don't have experimental evidence. And the number of questions, so conclusion, there is a possibility that we are hit on the current the total oblivion of the academia, almost total, but not complete, on the study of new studies on antimatter. There is a chance that we may be hit by an antimatter asteroid without even know how to detect it. We will be after, the knowledge will appear after the collision and the explosion.
Yes, exactly. Do you know that some people have written about a Tesla experiment and that caused the Tunguska event, but that's a rumor, you know.
There is no possibility to ionize the entire Earth. You need an enormous, if you calculate the energy that you need, is enormous. I'm a physicist, I do calculation, I do numbers. The numbers are enormous. Again, the energy for the ionized whole Earth, we're talking a large multiple of the energy of Hiroshima explosion, 80,000 tons of TNT.
Is there any scientists that are not very well and don't have a good good intentions towards the human race, have experimented antimatter bombs, or not?
No, because the only production of antimatter that we have now, thanks God, we are thousands of years away from this possibility. The only thing that we have produced, alleged antiproton at CERN, alleged, and at Fermilab. And then if I have the time, I would like to elaborate why it is not absolutely certain that they are indeed antiproton. The only antiparticle that we know for sure that we can produce in laboratory, for sure, without controversy and without any reservation, is the positron, which is the opposite, the antiparticle of the electron. But it's a tiny, puny particle. You cannot build a bomb out of it.
Okay, that's good news.
Yes,
sure.
Thank you, yes.
So the Santilli Isodual mathematics that came from those discoveries that you made on antimatter.
Well, the origin of the isodual mathematics is the following: that first of all, we needed when you see you look at the galaxy. Remember always my first dream 50 years ago. I want to study the faraway galaxies to see whether it's matter or antimatter. Now, galaxies have to be treated at a classical level. Because you cannot treat a galaxy with quantum mechanics. It will be preposterous. And secondly, the galaxy have to be assumed to be neutral. So the only mathematical tool that was available and is still available today in all best PhD courses at the best university, l'Université de Paris, the Imperial College, University of Moscow, Harvard, Berkeley, Princeton, is the charge conjugation. And but the charge conjugation apply only for charge. And so, and besides charge conjugation is incompatible with annihilation. Indeed, maybe now is the moment to indicate that one of the most frequent critics that I received and continue to receive from professional physicists, professor of physics, some even Nobel Prize, they tell me, Dr. Santilli, you are a dreamer. That antimatter light does not exist. In the universe, they claim there exists only one light, and it's the light that we know. Why so? They claim because the light is neutral, and therefore it is invariant under charge conjugation. You have the photon, which is the component of light. You subject it to charge conjugation, you get the photon. So there is only one light, and therefore antimatter light does not exist, antimatter galaxy, and you are a dreamer. If this statement is made by a high school student or a first-year grad student, then I will respect it. However, if it is made by a full professor of physics, then this gentleman or this lady, to qualify as to be a full professor of physics, he should know, he has the duty, obligation to know that charge conjugation is irreconcilably incompatible with annihilation. With charge conjugation, you only conjugate the charge. Everything else stays, the energy remains positive, everything stays. Under those conditions, annihilation is impossible. And this is this irreconcilable incompatibility of charge conjugation with annihilation is only one of the many insufficiency or inconsistency of charge conjugation. So in view of this, there was the need of a fundamentally new mathematics, a mathematics that will allow the conjugation of all characteristics and not only the charge. If the charge is there, okay, there will be conjugation too, but it's not necessary to be. Neutral, that can also be charged. And the construction of this mathematics requires years of trial and error. Finally, I was at the Department of Mathematics at Harvard, and finally I had the idea of technically is doing an anti-hermeticity. Is a map that characterized this new mathematics called anti-hermeticity. Technically, we call it isodual. It's now known as isodual. Iso because can preserve the axiom, but dual because it implies a conjugation. And this mathematics did indeed allow us to achieve to our goal. But most importantly, and above all, the isodual mathematics was built and to resolve the problem of causality that were faced by Paul Dirac in 1932. As indicated before, Paul Dirac conceived the antimatter because it was inevitable from his equation. You look at the so-called Dirac gamma 4, the diagonal, you see clearly there positive and negative energy. So it was inevitable for him to predict antimatter as having negative. But this was the Dirac problem that has persisted to nowadays, that negative energy violates causality. And it's very easy to prove that the first-year graduate students can prove it. So therefore, Dirac was forced to restrict antimatter only to very, very mysterious fields that technically then manipulated into so-called second quantization and so on. Isodual mathematics was built to, excuse me, sorry, to resolve the causality problem, because without resolving this causality problem, it was impossible to represent annihilation. And it was resolved precisely as I indicated before, namely by conjugating everything. Not only once you are in the antimatter world, you have to conjugate everything. So you cannot, I conjugate only the energy is negative, but the unit become positive. If you do that, you violate causality. And then you do. You violate causality in the antimatter world. No, you have to conjugate also the unit. So, but this isodual mathematics turned out to be very, very strange. I'm sorry, let me a sip of water.
That's all right.
Let me give a glimpse. Suppose, suppose you are made of antimatter, and suppose you have your bank. I'm sorry, I apologize.
That's all right.
Suppose you are you're a human being made of antimatter, which is a possibility. You never know. And so you have a checking account, of course, made of antimatter. The bank is made of antimatter. And here is the point. Suppose that in your antimatter checking account, you have $1 million. In your antimatter checking account, you have $1 million. You are broke. You will have the sheriff and bring you to send you to jail, because in the end everything is inverted. So that $1 million, when it is positive in the antimatter world, it is in reality negative. So to have a real money in the antimatter, you should be with minus. You should be under $1 million. So this is to understand, the mathematics is everything is opposite. So you have to. It takes some time for the mind to adjust, to invert, to conjugate the totality of our knowledge for our world has to be conjugated for this antimatter world, which for me is fascinating. For other people, maybe a little bit.
It's like the other side of the mirror. You just
yes.
You step on the other side of the mirror and you look at things in an inverted way. The other
exactly
right.
Exactly.
It's sort of like the black holes and the white holes on the other.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
And the twin Earths as well. So we'd have like a twin Earth somewhere. So you did measure. You experimented all those verifications regarding antimatter, right? From your standpoint, how have you managed to measure or experiment some type of verification about antimatter from your end?
Very well. Well, thank you. Let me review progressively what happened. May I ask the producer to put, please, the view of light bending.
Right.
Well, as indicated before, the antimatter has a negative energy. Now, refer to a negative unit, so there is no violation of causality. We are talking about isodual theory of antimatter, in which there is no violation at all. Now, as we know since Einstein time, there is the light bending, namely ordinary light, which has a positive energy, is bends because it is attracted by matter. That's what the picture shows. Now, but if the isodual light, which is light emitted by antimatter, has negative energy, then must be necessarily repelled. So this is an unavoidable consequence of the Dirac equation, of the negative energy in the Dirac equation. And everything I'm saying is established with the calculation, with the equation, and papers published in referee journals. Very well. Then could you please, the producer, put the second picture, the one on the index of refraction, if I may. Okay, so now another thing that is needed to see how do we arrive at our telescope is that something obvious that we see since our childhood, that when light, ordinary light, we call it matter light, when ordinary light hits water, it bends. Underwater, it bends. That's refraction. There is an angle of refraction. It bends because the speed decreases by 1/3, but it bends. Now we call this positive in this studies is called the positive index of refraction. But if antimatter light is repelled by matter, then the index of refraction must necessarily be the opposite. Again, over and over again, all features to consistently represent experimental evidence, all features of antimatter have to be opposite to those of matter, thus including the index of refraction. Instead of bending the conventional way, bends the opposite way. But then maybe the producer can put a picture of the Galileo and Santilli telescope, the schematics of Galileo and Santilli telescopes. Well, but then you see the point. This is we're talking about the Congress in Antimatter in Rhodes, 2014. But then the only possibility for focusing image caused by light with a negative index of refraction is to have concave lenses. This is my paper in 2014, published at the American Institute of Physics, out of a congress in which we discussed this in all great details. So if you compare the Galileo and the Santilli telescope, they are essentially the same. The only difference is that the Galileo has convex lenses and the Santilli has concave lenses. So so imagine the Galileo telescope, in orbit, that looks at the universe. It is, according to our view, it appears to be hit also by antimatter light. Antimatter light also hits the Galileo telescope, but the moment it finds a convex lens, that light is dispersed through the walls, and therefore that's why the Galileo telescope can clearly see image of matter light, of galaxies and so on. Well, exactly the same, but opposite occurs for the Santilli telescope. Matter, ordinary light, since it hits a convex lens, is dispersed all over the internal wall of the telescope. But this allows then to focus image, of course, only in a digital camera, because we cannot see antimatter light, as indicated before. It will be dispersed all over the retina because our body was made to see matter. And antimatter is so far away from our universe that we should not have expected to be able to see matter and antimatter. This is a little bit presumptuous.
Yes, so it allows with the concave lens to see invisible universe and entities.
Well, let's see first, if I may, let's review the galaxy, because that's what we did actually. This way we followed the actual evolution of the. So we're talking about 2014. It was clear that we need a telescopic concave lens. It took even though I had the money, thanks God, I had plenty of money to build it. But it was the construction of a telescopic concave lens. It was refused everywhere. Refused in America, refused in Germany, refused finally in China. The Chinese optical laboratory made one for me, and we initiated testing. Sorry, and in
do you know why it was refused in the Western world?
Because it said this banana. I was called with this crackpot. I was called with with all the names that you can think of, and because it's too much. With the convex, any person is an expert in optics. And you tell them you can see something in concave lenses. You see, they will tell you immediately, you are crazy. You are crackpot. You are just demented. You are
formatted by dogmas.
Oh yes, yes. But I never gave up. The mathematics and the physics they gave me strength, and so I kept going. Finally, I had the telescope. We did about 2 years of detection in the Vega region of the night sky, and finally I published in 2014 in a referee journal the title of the paper, Apparent Detection of an Antimatter Galaxy in the Vega region of the night sky. I'm a scientist. This has to be tested, retested, verified, re-verified, and so that's what the word apparent will remain for decades. Maybe the producer can put the image of what we see with our telescope, the various images of detection. The last one, I believe, is number 8. Perhaps anyhow. So then this has been this detection has been confirmed by 2 independent teams and published in referee journal. Both publications, they say apparent confirmation of Santilli detection, blah blah blah, because there has been a confirmation that of the apparent. So we have 3 independent detection of an apparent existence of an antimatter galaxy in the Vega region of the night sky. Then now we have a new one in the Capella region of the night sky, and I don't think I had the time to send you the image, but there is enough now to discuss. Now, what do we detect? This is interesting to the audience. Here in the picture that are shown, that we see in the Galileo, we see that first of all detection are done over time, for a minimum of 15 seconds. This is because we need a streak. You see, if we have one single point, nobody will accept, that point is a point made by the light of an antimatter galaxy. No way. No. So we need a streak, namely we need an elongated image. So 15 seconds usually for a 100 millimeter telescope is better. For a 200 you need more than that, double that. So what do you see in our camera for an ordinary star? You see a streak of light. Because the star over 50, the Earth rotates, and so the Earth, so the image is moved, and so you see a streak, a long streak of light, What do you see for the antimatter galaxy? You see a streak of darkness. A streak of darkness. Why? Again, Paul Dirac, because antimatter is expected to have negative energy. The background of a camera has positive energy, that the photovoltaic effect, that's positive energy. So basically, the image of the antimatter coming from that, apparently from that galaxy, has a negative energy and annihilates, cancel out the positive energy in the pixel along that streak. So we see exactly the same streak, the same direction, same length, everything is same. The only difference that one is brilliant, that's Galileo, that's ordinary light, and the other is black, The same similar detection are also for antimatter asteroids. We have detected many of them. I shouldn't say many, but several for sure. And antimatter cosmic rays that are highly technical for me to discuss here.
Okay, do you know, can you explain the difference between dark matter and antimatter?
There is no connection whatsoever.
No connection whatsoever. Okay, I just wanted.
Incidentally, the dark matter is a manipulation is in my opinion, is a dark episode in the history of science, because it was proposed to represent the internal anomalies in the cosmological redshift for star belonging to a galaxy. It never, ever represented, not even minutely represented the anomaly for which it was intended. Dark energy was proposed to derail attention from the inapplicability and not the violation of Einstein's special relativity in the gas, especially in the gas in the so-called inner galactic gas. Einstein's special relativity was, this is Einstein words, not Einstein followers. There is an abyssal difference. Einstein proposed and supported and propagated his theory for point particles and electromagnetic waves, Einstein words, moving in vacuum, That's Einstein. Einstein was Einstein. Einstein followers, I have my reservation. In the interior, of a galaxy, we have a physical medium at the vicinity of the center. It's very hot. And we have then essentially, but we have phenomena on the periphery. We have phenomena we have experimentally verified here on Earth. We can discuss this in another interview.
Right. So you put together for workshops on antimatter astrophysics, right?
Yes, we had three international conferences. One in Cepino, 1996. Then 2011 in Cepino, and in Cepino I had the great honor of receiving, of being appointed as a member of the Grand Cross of the Sant'Agata Order, with a title that carries that is an Italian title. Is the highest honor that can be granted by the Republic of San Marino. I feel very proud. And that's the reason why I'm wearing with me an image, a little symbol of this Grand Cross of the Sant'Agata Order, which is when I wear it in my chest, it's very nice. I usually wear it in great occasion, and when it's important, that's why I don't wear it today. I don't think it would have been inappropriate. But this Grand Cross was granted to me because we presented this what appears to be half of the universe can indeed be composed of antimatter galaxy that were totally unknown until prior to that time.
So you apparently detected antimatter galaxies, antimatter cosmic rays, and also
asteroids.
You outlined the dangers for Earth to be getting hit with antimatter asteroid. Do you think that CERN production of antiprotons and studies on anti-gravity can be a danger to Earth's magnetic field or safety?
No, no, I don't think. I don't think that. No, I think they're totally safe, totally safe tests. However, however, I have to express. I have done this in writing directly to the CERN directorate. I have to express a serious reservation as to whether the particle claimed by CERN to be antiproton, whether they are really made of antimatter. This is due to the fact that the way they produce it violates certain rules to really achieve antimatter, but also for other reasons, for many reasons. One of the reasons is the following. We have, in our laboratory at Thunder Energy, we have synthesized the neutron, a neutron flux, incidentally, also for societal accountability, because we use this neutron flux to detect the possible smuggling of nuclear weapons, as well as for the enforcement of nuclear weapons. Anyhow, how the detection is done? Is detection by essentially compressing an electron inside the proton. That's Rutherford 1910. That's the way he conceived the neutron. But here is the point. If we, in a laboratory in America, we can compress an electron inside the proton and form the neutron, then we can compress another electron inside the neutron and form a new particle which has a negative charge, but has the same mass as the proton. And so it's called, instead, it's called pseudoproton. So there is a realistic possibility that what the CERN claimed to be the antiproton is indeed the pseudoproton. In any case, since we are talking about the expenditure of $1 billion, close to $1 billion at CERN of taxpayers' money, I am not a member of CERN, but a citizen of the world. I have a long list of mathematical, theoretical, and above all, experimental steps that have to be taken prior to CERN claiming for sure that they produce particles, massive particles made of antiproton. I think their statement is politically in favor to maintain Einstein theory. It's 100% political, because true science is always dubitative. You see, apparent detection. It could be this. This is serious science. When they claim, no, we produce antiproton, that's politics. Politics gets money or to maintain a certain theory and so on. And so therefore, since there are mathematical, theoretical, experimental, and other conceptual doubts whether the antiproton is really made of antimatter, then the tests of anti-gravity at CERN not only are questionable, but if they concluded, they could create a scientific obscurantism that will last for centuries due to the power of CERN. Why so? Because their test is based on anti-hydrogen atom. The anti-hydrogen atom requires the so-called apparent claimed antiproton in the center. But if the claimed antiproton is not antimatter, then I can assure you that their test will be negative. Namely, the gravity of their claimed antimatter atom, it will be attraction. So therefore, potential, after spending $1 billion, a potential obscurantist will put them back to the middle age of science. Because what we're talking about truly fundamental on all levels, from A to Z, as far as science is concerned. Now, what is very questionable for CERN is that there exist other tests that are resolutory. Another one has been proposed, and which I proposed also in 1994, is the comparative measurement of the gravity of the electron and the positron in horizontal travel on Earth. Imagine a tube, ultra-cooled, ultra-vacuum, 10 meters long, and inside this tube you send a beam of very, very low energy electron. Then since the tube is horizontal, the electron will be attracted. If you put a scintillator at the end of the tube, and you're talking about milli electron volts energy, you can see the deflection caused by gravity on the electron. You can see with the naked eye. You can see it with the naked eye. Okay, and then you send on the same tube, you send a positron, of which we are positively sure, everybody universally agree that it's antiparticle. You send a very low energy milli electron volts positron inside this tube, And then at the end, you can see the displacement with the naked eye. No mambo jumbo theoretical manipulation. No elaboration of data by form factor and all these type of things that do adapt.
They claim to have found the Higgs boson. That's and then they claim they may have not found it, and they also claim that they're trying to open a extra dimensional or interdimensional portal at CERN. So they've been claiming all types of things at CERN. So
I have a very extremely severe reservation. The official statement that which I have the record is that that out of trillions of events, they located a few. Out of trillions of events, they located a few that are Higgs-like. That's political. First of all, to establish a party, you need at least 10 or 20% of the event of the picture have to be seriously considered. They have a few, so the probability, the credibility is already at the level of event is virtually zero because there are very few events. But then they claimed that Higgs-like. This is a body language to see that, they were not certain. But that was acceptable. You see, when this was the original statement, that I respected. I respected because they say Higgs-like, and it is possible. I cannot deny that. Nobody can deny. But then this has been by organized interest of Einstein, because what is at stake here is the maintaining of Einstein's special relativity in the scattering region. What is at stake here is trillions of dollars of research on this. You have no idea the politics going on. It's beyond the wildest imagination of the ordinary taxpayer. You just cannot. I have reached the top, the academia, not only at Harvard, but the sophisticated mathematics supported by the DOE. I've seen them all. The other side of science is very dark indeed. That's why I left academia. I left Harvard. Okay, let's go back to the Higgs just very quickly. So after the Higgs type, they became Higgs. Oh, everybody, that's a propaganda in all interview. Physicists from CERN. Then at that point, I don't respect them anymore. No, I'm sorry, because they should have said, no, we have an Higgs. They should have been cautious. Instead, they were not cautious. And then for the Higgs type, became Higgs. Everybody Higgs. We discovered Higgs. Made by professional people, paid by taxpayers from my money, and treat science in this way. And then after that, they organized and they got a Nobel Prize. But the point is that Einstein recommended this theory in a vacuum. The scattering region where the presumed Higgs is supposed to exist is the densest region ever produced by human mind. Without Einstein, Higgs, you cannot even describe you cannot even formulate. So the doubt is not so much in the Higgs. The doubt is on not the violation. Please, will be respectful toward Einstein. No, Einstein did not conceive his theory to be applied in a ultra hyperdense region. No, inapplicable. It's not considered for that. Is the inapplicability of Einstein in the scattering region that is by far the biggest historical shadow in the existence of Higgs. This is an historical shadow. Is a shadow in the history of European science, of human science, in my view.
Right. So you did recommend a test for anti-gravity, right?
Yes, comparative measurement of the electron and positron in horizontal flight on Earth.
Right, and you know about new technological applications to that.
Yes, it's not in my field, but now a number of scientists, they work in the isodual mathematics, including mostly on believe it or not, in the industry, because the industry is now in a number of fields is dramatically beyond academia. Let's be honest. The isodual mathematics, we do the calculation at the U.S. publicly traded company, Thunder Energy Corporation. But if you go to Harvard University, the Department of Mathematics, they don't use isodual mathematics. So this give you one example of them. But I know that there are very interesting medical application for to treat cancer with antimatter particle, because an antimatter with our isodual light that, as you will see, can be apparently produced artificially, because the annihilation. You see, when you hit when you eat a tumor, everything dies in the tumor. It doesn't go further, so you don't damage the rest of the body. So they are very intriguing. But the most intriguing application, in my view, are for mathematical models for UFO propulsion. This is my personal view.
Right, right. Which we'll touch in a few minutes after you tell us about how you came up with that idea. Since you put together detection applications for antimatter asteroids or cosmic rays, my question is: do you foresee any big solar revolution of gamma rays in our solar system affecting all sentient life and raising consciousness? Do you see any connection between those gamma rays and consciousness?
Honestly, it's beyond my knowledge, and everything I stated is published in referee journal, and everything I will state is published in referee journal, and what I can say that the consciousness is a fascinating field, which there's no doubt about, and because it's at the very essence of what we are as human beings. And what I can say that in a way, consciousness cannot be seen, and it cannot be detected with equipment, but it was the same for antimatter. You see, antimatter was not seen. So what I can say is that as a scientist, I strongly support an open mind, and definitely an open mind. I have open mind, and I recommend open mind. And before saying no, the things that appear nonsensical to us, we have to be careful. That's all I can say.
Right, right, right. Let's switch to the Santilli Telescope and the optical discoveries. The ITEs, you know, the invisible entities.
Yes, we'll be glad to do so. Thank you.
And those terrestrial, well, which you call ITEs, or invisible terrestrial entities, of the first, second, and third type. Can you describe those various types?
Love to. Thank you. This is well. First, let me go to what we call the first. But let's do the first step number one. You see, it took me long time before go public, so to say, before announcing those ITE. Why so? Because those ITE are entities, quote unquote, solely visible in the camera attached to the Santilli Telescope with concave lens. They are invisible to the other camera. Now, so clearly, this is isodual light. Clearly, this is light emitted by antimatter galaxy. So my knowledge, we're talking about 2 or 3 years ago, my knowledge of antimatter was for antimatter star. That's what I spent my 40 years of my life. I didn't develop the technology for ITE. No, my objective was to detect antimatter galaxy. Now, and why I had enormous reservation in accepting the existence of ITE? Because an antimatter object, entity, or spaceship in our atmosphere annihilates, the presence is impossible because Tunguska explosion. An antimatter object in our atmosphere will explode instantly because in contact with matter, and so therefore it cannot exist. So I had enormous reservation before, but then the evidence was coming, and finally we are a company. This was the research by corporate. We have it's a public company. We are funded by public funds, so we have the obligation to disclose. We cannot keep things secret. I can be sued in America. Stockholder can sue me if at a certain moment I reach a certain point I don't disclose what has been obtained, what has been discovered into the company following due patent, etc., etc. So it took me some time, but and in any case, the detection was the following. My wife and I decided to take a few days off. We went to a beautiful hotel in St. Petersburg Harbor. I'm sure you have been in Florida.
Yeah.
You have been in St. Peter's Harbor. It's magnificent. And we rented a room at the 7th floor, one of the beautiful hotels, as a balcony. We rented with a balcony. We wanted to look at the stars and see whether we could see some other galaxies in some other region of the sky besides Vega. But we arrived, but the weather was terrible. It was not raining, but was totally cloud. So we were very disappointed, and so by sheer accident, we said, well, okay, let's aim the telescope horizontally, and to our enormous surprise, we started to see objects that should not supposed to exist, because the lens is concave. Again, not to repeat, but and the concave lens can only focus the image from isodual light with a negative index of refraction. And so, but then this thing kept repeating itself. And so we started to doubt our own doubt. And finally, we decided to disclose our what we have detected for whatever its value is, insisting in independent verification. We have received a number of independent, one of them from the director of the St. Petersburg Astronomy Club. It's a beautiful detection. And so we disclose it. But what's the gist? The gist is that what it boils down. It boils down. Let me put the IT. Let me put in a different perspective. You see, 20 or 30 years ago, both civilian, but the military drive was over stealth, over invisibility for obvious military reasons. Well, what I can say that nowadays, only 2 decades after, the means for achieving invisibility of ordinary object made of ordinary matter are so much advanced, mathematically, physically, and otherwise, to be beyond our imagination, and so the one thing in which IT can be seen is the following. Suppose you are a curious man, and you have lots of money, and you say, I want to create a new light. So you call a bunch of engineers, and you put them in a building. Say, here is $1 million prize for anybody, any engineer who can manipulate ordinary light in such a way that its index of refraction becomes the opposite. From light refracting on one way, it refracts the opposite way. It is an engineering problem. A smart engineer can find a solution. And it is possible that the solution has been found. Mm-hmm. And so basically is one of the many ways to achieve invisibility. Now, you asked the very important question: is what is the difference? The IT 1, 2, 3. Incidentally, to identify the name, I went to the Webster Dictionary, and the Webster Dictionary told me about the definition of invisible. It's invisible to the human eyes, but it doesn't. Very subtle. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's very, very subtle. That's why the Webster Dictionary is the Webster Dictionary. So that's why so it's invisible to our eyes, but it's fully visible to they are fully visible to our equipment. So we ended up with detecting 3 different types among many, and so have been detected by others. The first one is as exactly all the first two, both of them are detected and are only detected with concave lenses, which means the light is isodual, necessarily an isodual light. It's not conventional light, it's the new light. And there are 2 types. One leaves a black image in the background of a digital camera, and the other instead leaves a bright image. In particular, those that leave a black image are outside our atmosphere. They're all have been detected let's say in a terrestrial environment, but not in our. And so, therefore, since they have a negative index of refraction and they have negative energy, they appear to be potentially maybe an entity made of antimatter, but they cannot enter in our atmosphere because they will explode. The second type instead requires a negative index of refraction, but it leaves a very brilliant image. This means that they are machine in our environment. They are physical machine that if we could touch them, you will feel them in they're ordinary machine. They just, the light that is emitted is manipulated in such a way to achieve invisibility. The third is a third method to achieve invisibility. Let me tell you a little experiment that we did here in the USA at our also at our Thunder Energy at our institute. And namely, we prove that you have a laser light. We pass this laser light in a long, in a 60 feet long tube at pressure, 2000 psi pressure, and we tested the low temperature, let's say ice, and high temperature, a couple of 100 degrees or more. And we prove that when this laser light passes through a cold gas, loses energy. The gas is warmed up, and when we wake up in the morning, the atmosphere is cold. At night, the atmosphere is hot. Where is the energy coming for that temperature? It's come from light. Light has lost energy to our atmosphere. It's exactly the same thing. A high school student can see it, not a professor of physics at Harvard, Université de Paris, London, Paris. No, because light is immutable for them as a condition for the applicability of the special relativity for all conceivable conditions existing in the universe, expected in their dream. Until the end of time, there will be the special relativity. No, there's a physical medium. Light can lose energy, but then these are deviations from Einstein's special relativity. But when the same light passes through hot gas, it acquires energy. The frequency will increase. Conclusion: imagine a spaceship out there. And suppose that this spaceship has a capability to be surrounded by the very, very strong, by gas, which is very, very high temperature. The light emitted by that spectrum instantly becomes invisible to us because it goes into the ultraviolet. So this is a third method to achieve, the third of many modern methods to achieve invisibility that are technologically, mathematically, and physically beyond Einstein.
That's probably one of the reasons why those spaceships are invisible to our Galileo telescopes from Earth.
Yes.
Right.
Also, some of the UFOs, and they claim to be to instantly accelerate. No, maybe they shift, they control the light, and they become invisible. But maybe they're still there.
So, do you think those ITEs are extraterrestrials in origins, or something else?
Honestly, I am a scientist. I can only everything I stated again has been published in referee journal. I don't want to repeat, but I do not. Honestly, I cannot. I cannot say what I can. Let me say. I pray. I pray that that indeed those IT, their machine. That have been built and operated by our military. I am an American. I'm strongly supportive of my government. I have no words to say thank you to my government, NASA, the Air Force. I was supported by NASA in Miami, the United States Air Force at Boston University in the Department of Energy. So I'm biased for our government. My government will have my eternal gratitude. So I pray that our government indeed is one of the many military secrets. If that's the case, I'm sure others in Europe, I'm sure that the European community may have the same, and Russian may have the same, because scientific it's very difficult to keep the secret, even for military secrets when there are basic.
There's a big gap between public civilian scientists and the ones working on those black programs. I mean, I've had many witnesses inside those programs, and there's a huge gap. They don't want to disclose to the public.
That is true. However, independent from that, where our militaries are abroad, they're exposed to all sorts of risk. They risk their life to defend us. As a scientist, I want to do something to help them to defend themselves. So this telescope has also been developed because our military, not only I mean, it means also European. We live in a global village. That's the way I conceive our planet as a scientist. But the point is this: that they may be exposed to objects. Suppose that those IT are not made by our military or our allies, and they're made by potentially hostile objects. There is a possibility, but with our at least they have a chance to identify them with our equipment. So there is also a question of support support to our military in the eventuality. Those machines, indeed, they come, as you indicated, they could come from far away. I'm convinced, however, that we are not alone in the universe. There is no question about it. The statistical possibility that we are alone is preposterous. It's virtually it's zero. And it will be also arrogant to believe that we are the only intelligent.
For sure, yeah. Would be a big waste of space, as Carl Sagan used to say. Do you distinguish the ITE from images of impurities on the objective lenses?
Yes, of course. This is the very peculiarity of our technology. Not only we do not clean our lenses, but sometimes we put, if they are very clean, sometimes brand new, we put a little impurity. Why so? Because the first thing that we do is for any new telescope, we document the impurities and at different enlargements. And so that we can clearly distinguish an object that doesn't exist in the background impurity. Let me put it this way. Then, if it is not part of the impurity, then it's something not necessarily an ITE. It's something worth investigating. Then, at that moment, our team enters a very, very severe analysis, because it's possible that some of it could be an optical effect caused by a new optical effect caused by the concave lens. See, we are talking about an optics. It is totally unknown, the isodual optics, the optics of concave lens, but this way to focus image, not. So it's possible it could be an optical illusion. So as a result of our severity, we only end up accepting as possible ITE those that, first of all, they are clearly distinguished from those impurities, but it's not enough. They have to move with respect to the impurities. Mm-hmm. They have to have a motion. When they have this motion, then we get excited.
Great. Yeah. So moving entities, basically. Have you had any feedback from the UFO community, or regarding the discovery of your entities, ITEs?
Yes, I got many privately, or mostly private, from the UFO community. I've been a member of MUFON for many years, and, and I'm sure it is the equivalent in Germany, and so UFO, I've been fascinated by a few. Then of 15, when I still was far away from detecting antimatter galaxy, I was saying that UFO are interesting from a scientific view for a scientist, even if they do not exist, because they're still so stimulated to stimulate the imagination and so on. So I had a number of them, yes, with the clarification, however, that MUFON is controlled by our government, something that I respect, because our government does not want to disclose the UFO, the origin of UFO at this moment. I said before, I'm strongly supportive of my government.
So do you favor governmental disclosure on UFO or not? I know there's been a lot of disclosure movements, from Stephen Greer to Stephen Bassett and others, the disclosure projects and disclosure movements all around, the citizens hearing in DC and elsewhere, and there's been a lot of efforts to push our governments, the Canadian governments and the U.S. government, to disclose on the UFO secrecy, which has been around for over 60 years now.
Allow me to express my viewpoint. I do support the current position of the government of not disclosing UFO. Here is the point, key point, however, under the current condition and circumstances. In other words, I am opposed to an abrupt disclosure. Tomorrow morning, somebody appears in the White House or at the Champs-Élysées in France with a UFO. This will our society will be devastated. I mean, let's face it. There will be a collapse of stock market. The consequences could be cataclysmic, in other words. So, because the society is not prepared. So what I support, and that's where I disagree with even with my government, and what I disagree is that I do not see any serious step implemented progressively that will eventually lead to a disclosure without these cataclysmic conditions that an abrupt disclosure will imply. So yes, I am in favor of a disclosure. It will be unavoidable in any case. It will be unavoidable sooner or later. But they should be programmed. They should be programmed. Specifically, for instance, let's talk about physics. The moment the UFO appear coming from another star, Einstein is gone as dominating the entire universe as it is now. So look at now at the governmental funding. All the totality of the money, $1 trillion is granted in America, is granted if and only if whatever the grant is compatible with Einstein. To travel from another star, you have to be a million times the speed of light. But I see not even a hint of initiating the funding in the United States, and I believe it's the same in Europe, particularly the Division Deuxième.
Yes, but here we don't know that there are billions of dollars or euros on this end missing, and in the U.S. we know there's billions of dollars missing at the Pentagon. From the Pentagon for last year, the last fiscal year. So
that could go to for UFO. But I was referring to grants from the Department of Energy for academic research. They are made under the condition to be that they have to be compatible with Einstein. So, but UFO are not. So many other antimatter is not. So, but what the point is that I do not see the federal funding energy, and I was mentioning the Division Deuxième at the European Community in Brussels, in which I had personal contact, extremely negative, very, very questionable contact, in which, again, the totality of the investments are rigorously imposed. There is not even a shadow of scientific democracy for qualified inquiry. Right. Both the European Community and the United States of America, per my personal, regarding funding is concerned. However, what if they want to prepare the future disclosure, the first thing to do is start to allocate at least a small amount of that money for research beyond Einstein, surpassing Einstein. Now you may apply for a mechanism that provides a superluminous speed. Right. You are treated in an offensive way by the Division Deuxième or by the Department of Energy. They really treat you in a vulgar way. Instead of being open to the possibilities.
That will lead us to your view on interstellar travel, because you have an opinion on that, right?
Yes, I do.
Mm-hmm. To reach the stars, we have the technology to reach the stars right now.
No.
And missions.
No, we don't have the technology, but because we have to start, as it was the case for antimatter, you have to start first from serious mathematics, and then from mathematics you start. If you don't have the appropriate mathematics, no point in trying. The mathematics now, the mathematics of Einstein. Speed of light is the limit. When the speed of light is limit, forget about interstellar travel because they make no sense. And you have to reach millions of times the speed of light to really but those are mathematically, I think they're mathematically possible. So my suggestion is to initiate the study of interstellar superluminous speed by professional physicists at professional at qualified institution. Fund those that's what the Division Deuxième should do at l'Université de Paris, but it doesn't to maintain Einstein. Because of the politics on Einstein.
Right, Einstein is a dogma. It's just like
a dogma. So, but then there is no preparation of the grounds for the future disclosure. But I can assure you that there exists now a model, not only mine, several others, made by professional mathematicians, who produce indeed multiple of the speed of light as for actual machines, but only mathematically, however, not physically.
So what about the Alcubierre warp drive mechanics that was, that engine that's supposed to be taking any ship to superluminous speed? It was, I think, studied in 96 or 95, the Alcubierre warp drive. NASA talks about it.
Yes, there are a number of them. There are a number of them that, however, that NASA talks about them, but I don't think that NASA gives funds for this study. Actually, I exclude it because I had personal contact with NASA too. There are many others. I want to mention also one is Nasica. Professor Nasica is a professional physicist who has come up with an extremely interesting mechanism that apparently triggers the participation of the ether of the space as a universal substratum. And but many of them I did not have the time, I apologize, to review them, but they're all, in my opinion, they should be all investigated seriously. Why not?
Right, right. Since we don't have much time, I'm going to ask you still to go back to the Santilli Telescope and tell us really quickly about the latest discoveries. Like, you produce any footage or photos with the Santilli Telescope? I know we saw the article about the tax collector building where you detected some ITEs there in Florida.
Yes, there are many of them. Some of them, I apologize. Some of them have not yet been, remember, I'm the chief scientist of a publicly traded company, so I have a very special restriction. Some of them have not yet been disclosed because they're under check and controlling and verification and so on. But they are disclosed if any auditor is any of the audience is interested, can go to the website of thunder-energies.com. thunder-energy.com, and then click on the news. And there, after checking and rechecking, we verify them. I want to report one which is, however, disclosed there, and it is under a number of eyewitnesses. This was done with a pair of 150 millimeter telescopes, and which maybe you can show the picture number 6 or 7. You can show that is in production and sale by Thunder Energy, and it was in front of my house. In Palm Harbor, Florida, near Tapo Springs, and it was 9:30 in the evening, and both telescopes were active. Each one have his own camera, and we could look at the camera, at the display of the camera. In both cases, there were a number of us was there, and we were looking at since we were looking, the telescope was oriented about 30 degrees over the horizon, so I was looking at the atmosphere. So none of us look at the Santilli Telescope because we expected nothing. And we were looking at the Galileo to see whether there was any little asteroids and so on. All of a sudden, one of us yelled, "Look at the Santilli Telescope!" And we saw, we saw immediately an image appearing in our telescope, in the Santilli Telescope with concave lens, a very neat image appearing there of a ship, of a clear ship, emitting a fantastic display of light. Immediately, we took several pictures because it lasted a few minutes, the view. We checked and rechecked. This is one of the multiple eyewitnesses. Then we released this view, and all of a sudden appear and then disappear. Not necessarily moved away. You see, this is the point. Not necessarily, because this type of control of light allows you to appear and disappear and reappear, and then eventually move if you want. But to disappear, there is no, you don't need an instantaneous acceleration.
So you were able to also detect UFOs over military bases?
We never went checking on military bases, because then I would be in big trouble.
Right.
Then I would be, no. But we checked, for instance, the Tampa area. Mm-hmm. In the Tampa area, we have detected more than once, we have detected what we call a probe. It appears to be a real probe, because again, this was from the Westin Theater. Well, I'm sorry, the Westin is also theater, but the Westin Hotel, Westin, mm-hmm. Westin, Westin
Near
Hotel.
The Causeway.
I'm sure you know on the Causeway. Bravo, you know, because you're big here. Bravo. And I bribed one of the parking gentlemen, and so we went with my car. To the top level of parking level, which overlooks Tampa, and we with my car, and then we placed the telescope and so on. Again, the pair of telescope, and on the right side, on the left telescope, the Galileo, we saw the Gandhi Bridge, clearly. On the right hand side was the Santilli Bridge, and it was clearly a probe, because it was flashing, was appearing. This always with 15-second exposure. Remember, we don't do instantaneous exposure because nobody will accept them. So they have to be over time, so that there is a trace that can be analyzed, so it gives more credibility than just a flash. The antimatter cosmic ray, they give a flash, but not the other. So it was clearly a probe, because it was appearing and appearing, but then moving to the right, appearing and disappearing. And you can see even the increase and the decrease of the intensity. So this is typically a probe. What it was looking for, maybe looking at those at the tax collector and see, who knows?
Right, exactly. And okay, those probes or those balls of lights or those drones are often seen, detected by your telescopes. Is your concave lens very tricky to manufacture, or is it easy to manufacture, or not?
No, it is difficult and expensive. Unfortunately, we are expensive. We are now putting in production what we call a monocole, but all will be in large volume, and therefore will be inexpensive, below $100. Will be a monocular. A monocular that it can be attached to the smartphone.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yes, and then will be the cost will be moderate. But for instance, on we're talking about a 200 millimeter telescope. We're talking about an astrophysical station.
Right.
Just you need we're talking about the need of astrophysical type Canon cameras that may cost 6,000 each, so 12,000 just for astrophysical camera. So, but however, the 70 millimeter and 100 millimeter telescope are very reasonable. They're listed for sale in Amazon.com. Okay. Anybody can access Amazon.com, look Santilli Telescope, and you see them listed for sale. Actually, there is now a year-end closeout. I'm not sure it's 50% discount.
Good. Excellent. What do you know about those astronomers that detect strange objects and UFOs they catch in space? You know, like the Irish astronomer Eamon Ansbro. I think I sent you a link about him, who says he has successfully tracked UFOs and can predict where and when UFOs will appear. And apparently even the ESA published his work.
Well, I'm positively sure that UFO have been detected a number of times by professional astrophysicists. I've seen genuine picture analyzed by professional of object passing through in between us and the sun. Mm-hmm. Of course, near us, otherwise they will burn. But also, so positively, the UFO have been detected in space by astronomers. Whether the gentleman can predict, where that I don't know.
That's pretty hard to believe. But there's a classical case of the Dr. Norman Bergeron's motherships in the ring makers of Saturn. In the rings of Saturn, back in the days, he detected huge motherships in the rings of Saturn. I don't know if you remember Norman Bergeron. There's also a guy named John Leonard Walson who says he detects who shot some motherships in space recently. And there's also this case of the Black Knight satellite in Earth's orbit that everyone's been talking about for decades. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yes, I think those are they all are rather serious. They should be knocked down, with irony. No, I think that would be very childish, if I may say so, because the reality is very complex. What is out there? Yes, I believe a number of them. I can add to your excellent list. I can add the last probe that was sent by Russia to Mars mysteriously died. But before that, send some images. Apparently, the very last image that sent was the image of a very elongated disk-type shadow on the Mars. So it was not the image of the object itself. It was the image
of the Phobos thing. Yeah.
Of the image of the was very, very elongated, so it could not possibly be a satellite. No, absolutely, it was No, it had to be an object. If that shadow is correct, very, very elongated, like the shadow caused by a disk. It looks exactly like that. And it is known, is available in Russia, in the USA. So this is to tell you what you indicated. All those detections should be taken very seriously, because incidentally, the independent detection by the president of the St. Petersburg Astronomy Club was in the neighborhood of the moon. It was not in our environment.
Right.
In the neighborhood of the moon, and moon rotated actually, and was of the first kind. He created a black image. So it's really exactly along what you indicated.
Right. Thanks.
I believe that our telescope can contribute to inspect the sky. And why not? Why oppose an additional possibility of detection? And after the detection, we can maybe perhaps discuss whether it is valid or not valid, but not knock it down before the detection. That will be political.
Thanks, Dr. Santilli. Before we get to the major, most crucial part, which is the clean energy applications and the hadronic science and magnegas and plasma reactor, we're going to swing by again the UFO phenomenon and talk about your personal encounter in '82 with your family in Italy. Can you tell us about your very close encounter in the mountains of central Italy in 1982 with missing time? And it's registered in the MUFON files.
Well, yes, I did. I was at Harvard at that time under DOE support. And so when we came back, we were investigated. We were all my family, my wife Carla and my two children. They were grown up at that time. We were not babies. They were Luisa and Hermano. So we are four of us, and we were investigated by the MUFON in Cambridge, Massachusetts. But we were investigated in an anonymous way, because at that time I was on the DOE support and I could not disclose my name. But so it can be located very easily, or anybody is interested, I'll try to locate myself the report and eventually make it available. But now time has passed, and I have decided to disclose this personal encounter, because over and over again, because I see the enormous stimulus that the UFO phenomena can provide, a positive stimulus, a positive contribution to our society, to stimulate new technology, new view, new vista, to enlarge our horizon and so on. So I'm very supportive of the professional study of the UFO. The encounter was typical in a way. We were on a valley about 800-meter elevation where my grandfather was lived, and then we had to go to the top of the mountain, 1,500-meter, where my house still is there. I go there once every number of years. And so we're talking about 800-meter elevation covered in horizontally in less than half a mile. So it was very, very steep road. It was very steep road that in high mountains you go, they zigzag, zigzag, and zigzag. Finally, you reach the top. And there was a very dense forest everywhere. And now, when we start in the valley, we saw on the midway in this 800-meter elevation that we have to, an enormous flash of intense light. But we thought it was some station working with arc welder, because only the arc welder could do. So maybe they were working there. So we completely ignored this. And so we are Italian. We always talk about each other, and we discuss Italian style, which doesn't mean we have a disagreement. No, we just start vigorously. So we start. I don't remember what discussion. And I was driving, and we kept going. All of it. And we thought, the light was there every tournament. The light was still there. Well, we thought, no, that was an arc welder, so that's it. So we completely ignored it. But when we reached finally one tournament, the source of that light was right there. Was one of the most mysterious, most emotional episodes of my entire life, with no comparison whatsoever. Was a prolate ellipsoidal shape. Was at least the images on the rim was rotating all sorts of colors. My son was a fantastic eyesight, much better than me. He had the description of details on the light that even myself I did not see with my eyesight. And the most mysterious thing was that on the top there was a huge cone, a pulsating cone of light toward the sky, which I instantly interpret as a discharge. I am a physicist. I immediately noticed that this structure, this craft, had an enormous amount of energy, so you couldn't keep it all inside. So I immediately interpret this we have the exhaust in our car, and this machine had it was discharging the excess energy, toward the sky, because otherwise it would have burned the forest. And of course, there was a pandemonium occurred inside the car. I had to stop the car at the edge of this the serpentine. The object was suspended in the middle of the tree in front of us. I don't know. I'm talking about 6 or 7, 10 meters at the most, something in that range. And so it was an enormous pandemonium inside the car. Everybody was yelling, but I yelled louder than anybody else. And I said, "Shut up!" Both Italian, stai zitto, in Italian and in English, because I had to know whether there was any noise. I am a physicist. I am curious. So finally, they understood that I was serious. So there was a moment of silence. It was a moment of silence, and there was a total silence. Not only there was a total silence, those forests, especially in the Apennines or any other forest at night, they are full of all sorts of all sorts of animals, crickets and little things, dogs, wild dogs and animals. I never heard a forest so silent like that one. The winds were down.
So that, sorry to interrupt you. This is what you called a time space or the time anomaly, which is described as the Oz factor, in this phenomenon.
That is also one of the aspects. Indeed, you enter in a completely different world. You exit from our world, and you enter into a totally new one. Mathematically, the geometry is changed from the Minkowskian geometry becomes an extremely complex geometry, which is at the basis of their propulsion. Incidentally, I studied this mathematically, so we enter into the exciting part. So once I heard that the object was totally silent, I really was out of my wits, because it was beyond my imagination. And now, after 1 minute of silence, the commotion in the car restarted. I was forced to, but then my memory, there is a missing time, I believe. I'm not sure. I have no evidence. So I'm a scientist. I have to say,
for you and your family, right?
All of us. Right. Anyhow, because what I remember that after passing, that I restarted the car. Remember, this was in the middle of a huge forest with a vertical, very vertical, very steep forest. So I restarted the car. I moved, and as I move, I'm less than 50. I made the S. Then you go the S and you go to go up. You made an S to go up. When I finished the S to go down, the object had moved. Mm-hmm. Object was no longer where all of us we saw it. They'd moved somewhere else. So I stopped there, and my son and I, we exit from the car. My wife and my daughter was yelling not to do it. They were afraid. So and again I yelled.
It had moved or disappeared?
No, it moved, but it was still there.
Okay, all right.
Still there. And then I yelled again, "Shut up!" Because I need to know. Again, it was total silence. But then after it was again an eerie moment of this, and then all of a sudden my son detected that it was hovering. Indeed, started the lift, and he started to lift very slowly. He lifted very slowly, and then it exited the trees, and then it moved toward the valley, all moving very slowly.
And silent.
Total silence.
And you think this episode actually inspired you, prompted you to study UFO propulsion system?
Yeah.
Right,
Yes.
Right. So do you think you did get some type of telepathic download from the object, or it just came up into your own mind afterwards, after observing the phenomenon?
No, there was no telepathic. No.
Okay.
If at all, my memory, if I really had, in the event, I really had missing time to erase
Right.
my memory, and I have no intention of having a
So
regressive
you came up
process.
with the what you call the isogeoetric propulsion system,
Yeah.
which is a strictly non-Newtonian propulsion system. Can you describe it? And then we'll have to, because we only have 10 minutes left, we'll have to switch to the new clean energy applications in the hadronic science, because this can lead us to this last point.
Well, no, I had no communication. None whatsoever, because what I'm describing you came only after years and years of
Years and years. Yeah.
years of hard work. But let me give you this is basically, this has been published in a book, in an article, in a book published by Springer. Springer is one of the most prestigious scientific publishing house in the world, in Germany, Heidelberg. He has published also other books on mine. But this is part of antimatter. It was part of antimatter. It was an evident consequence. The propulsion is an evident consequence of antimatter. And anyhow, so first you have to see the geometry, and then we can discuss the propulsion. First of all, to see the geometry, mathematically is extremely complicated. Talking about something much more complicated than the Riemann geometry. Riemann geometry is Einstein geometry for gravitation. We are talking about much more complicated than that. But the main principle, however, has to be understood by everybody. If not, it's my fault. It's not. It's my fault, because the equation is the technical elaboration of concept that everybody should be able to understand. So, what is the Newtonian propulsion? Newtonian propulsion is based on the distance. Namely, I want to go from here to there, and there is 5 kilometers. So that's the Newtonian propulsion. But the distance, the notion of distance, is a fundamental notion of the Euclidean geometry. So the Euclidean geometry is based on so-called invariant, which is the distance. Okay. In this new geometry, the distance can be manipulated. It becomes arbitrary. So you have a geometry in which the distance can be accommodated in any way you want. You want to have it small, you have it small. You have it big, you have it big. And so this is basically the principle of this isogeometry, because it is based on isomathematics. Isomathematics is based on an arbitrary number. It's a mathematics with a number can be arbitrary, and therefore the distance can be arbitrary. So in conclusion, mathematically we can control the distance. So the distance from here to the next star, to Vega or some other star, is 5 million light years. Okay, we can reduce to 2 days, because this is mathematically this is indeed possible by controlling with use of, with appropriate geometry. As far as the propulsion is concerned, the propulsion is extremely complex, and this way is beyond the level of science fiction of today, because it's based on. Let me put it in a different way. I did calculation on that object that we saw, and when it moved, it did. What I'm about to say seems to be really crazy, but I want to say it. Just to say how incredible is those new horizons are, beyond our imagination. So we observe, all four of us, we observe that star that could be seen near the object after he had left our area, because it moved very, very slowly for a long time. The stars near there were deformed in a way dramatically more than the Einstein bending of the light for a light passing near the sun. What does this means that physically? Well, we know the deflection of the sun is 1.74 arc second, which is very, very small, 1.7 arc second, but created by the entire energy inside the sun. Created by the entire energy contained in the sun, it creates a deflection of 1.74 arc second, tiny puny one. And this object created a multiple of that the deflection. What does it mean? And here is the statement that really goes beyond, but I want to make it. It's my view, this is a result of calculation. The calculation to achieve that deflection means that inside that object, there was a multiple of the entire energy contained in the sun. Wow. Inside that object, there was a multiple of the entire. Imagine the energy of the sun. It's astronomical. It's beyond our comprehension. And in a little object, apparently little like this. However, the isogeometry, also the moment you enter into the object can have arbitrary dimension. There is the so-called, to understand this geometry, the so-called cube, isocube. From the outside, which is our universe, you see a cube. Right. An observer inside can see a cathedral, an enormous cathedral, because it's based on a new, different geometry, and this is fascinating beyond science.
Yeah, this explains all this time and objects and space distortion from contactees or experiencers inside the ships. From the outside, it looks smaller than from the inside.
It's been reported by many people.
Right,
and
right.
People we observed the same thing. At the outside, it looked like there must have been, about 6 or 7 meters in diameter. But I believe inside must have been very, very big.
Yeah. So
geometry represents this quantitatively with equation in a very, very rigorous way. Yes, those are not space anomaly, but then there is the time anomaly too.
Right. Let's give you the final word, because we only have a few minutes on the most important part to me. It's the new clean energy applications and hadronic science. Can you tell us quickly in about 5 minutes what the magnegas and the plasma reactor are meant to create as a clean solution for energy systems for today and tomorrow?
Thank you for asking the question, but we are talking about 4 decades of research, which has no connection with antimatter, and so I will be visually. I would love to. I'm at your disposal to have a separate interview in which we can review all the details. I can say, however, that we are having a summit in China at Hainan Island. And it's called SIPS 2016. SIPS, S-I-P-S. S as Susan, I, P as Peter, S as Susan, 2016. I am an invited keynote speaker. There is a summit precisely in honor of those research. That is a summit in China dedicated to the environmental problem. So anybody who is interested, I think, should attend that summit, because we will discuss those things in all details.
Right. And those basically those magnicules. Next time we'll reinvite you for the next show, and you can expand on how the magnicules work and how you can actually transform electrons from one specific matter into a different type of matter. So this can be a solution for polluting substances and maybe nuclear wastes and things like this. What do you think?
Well, yes, the Thunder Energies Corporation, our primary objective, antimatter is only one division. It's not the primary. It's curious and fascinating, but the primary objective is a direct societal relevance. First of all, to achieve fuels with total combustion. That's magnegas, but that's magnegas Corporation. But under energy, we work at a basically new conception of combustion. It is my opinion that the current combustion all over the planet of fuels is essentially the same as it was 50,000 years ago at the dawn of civilization. We strike a match and burn the fuel. Well, we are at the third millennium. For God's sake, there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way to conceive the combustion per se, and that's what we are doing. We are working out on a fundamentally new type of combustion that produces clean fuel and, above all, clean energy. But those clean energy, let me say, they are all designed in support of the petroleum industry. In other words, the petroleum is there; it will be burned to the end of time until So my job as a scientist, as a realistic scientist, is not that of replacing the petroleum with something else. No, no, no. This is not realistic. No, no. My job as a scientist is the opposite. My job as a scientist is to help the petroleum industry so that the petroleum can be burned without any damage to the environment. So the economy is maintained because it's a petroleum-based economy, so no disruption. But as scientists, we do our contribution just to avoid. And this can be done with our fundamentally new concept of burning gasoline, how to burn diesel, how to burn oil. Is a basically new concept, a very high temperature, based on new mathematics, new physics, new experiments. It's all beyond Einstein. If you use Einstein, Fukushima is Einstein. Chernobyl is Einstein. That's what you can do with Einstein theory. Fukushima was designed and built based was a condition to get the money. That the equations were based on Einstein. But this is no damage to the image of Einstein. That's what the energy you can do. The only possibility to achieve clean energy, you have to surpass Einstein. You have to pass with new mathematics, new physics, and new experiment.
Well, Einstein is the dogma to science that Darwin is to our evolution as a species. So basically, there are the same dogmas, similar dogmas. Can hadronic science be used for healing, for example? Can it re-engineer our DNA and cell structuring?
Well, we have one branch. Hadronic mechanics is based on various branches: isotopic, genotopic, and hyperstructural. The third branch is hyperstructural. Namely, is the most complex mathematics that is conceivable by the human mind. Mm-hmm. You multiply 2 by 2, and normally you get one result, 4. In isomathematics, you get one result, but something else, and so on. But when you go hypermathematics, the multiplication 2 by 2 can give you 10 to the 40, 10 to the 50 different results. This is necessary for the future, not beyond my life, but the future initiation or attempt to understand the DNA code. And because you have two atoms, the correlation of two atoms in a DNA eventually results in my entire eyes that contains 10 to the 40 atoms. So you see the necessity to have an hypermathematics for any truly serious consideration of biological structure. So to answer your question, once we achieve a better, deeper understanding, deeper representation of biological structure, which are dramatically beyond any dream of capability for quantum chemistry, then at that moment your question becomes very realistic.
Okay. One last word. I'll give you the final words. On what's your take on our upcoming short-term future and evolution as a planet and species, regarding our access to a higher consideration and respect for consciousness, maybe spirit, soul, and matter functioning together in a more fluid manner? Do you think this is all going to be in sync soon, or are you optimistic or pessimistic about our short-term future?
I'm optimistic, however, with serious reservation. I am an environmentalist. Mm-hmm. We are facing, we as a human society, again, as a scientist, I see no boundaries. We are in the global village. The planet is the global village. As a scientist, I see that we are facing very serious environmental problems. In my 20 years I've been in Florida, the southern belt of the United States, the number of deaths in winter per year has multiplied. Usually it will be 5 or 10. Now there are 200-300 deaths per year. So you extrapolate in about two or three generations from now, the entire southern belt of the United States of America will be uninhabitable. In any case, we have to assume this as we can debate when it will happen, but we have to assume, if we are very serious toward our children and grandchildren, because it's very easy to dismiss this possibility. The number of deaths per year, the fact that they multiply, cannot be dismissed. Now, here is the issue. Now, we are facing very, very serious environmental problem that they will hit primarily our children and above all our grandchildren. of which we will be looked as being responsible for what we do now, for what we do now. And here is my, my main point. It is my, after working for half a century in the environment, it is my deep conviction that absolutely there is no possibility whatsoever that we can even formulate, let alone achieve, even formulate the solution of those environmental problems by using 20th century science, including 20th century mathematics, 20th century physics, Einstein, quantum chemistry. It is impossible. It is, again, Fukushima, Einstein is Fukushima. You cannot do better than Fukushima with Einstein theory. That's it. So it is. So I see as a question of very survival, that we we scientists we surpass Einstein, which is mandatory. All those new energy we are developing at under energy that are based on formula and mathematics that are incomprehensible with Einstein theory. So, but here is my point. My point is this: that my pessimism is that the entire academic world is nowadays dominated by organized interest and trillions of dollars of research per year. That they are organized to discredit any qualified research, including new energies, that surpasses Einstein. So this is a statement that I made, I intend to make right to. It is my opinion that in view of this necessity of solving this increasingly cataclysmic environmental problem, in view of the need of surpassing Einstein, because there is no other way, it is my opinion that, that organized interest on Einstein constitute a threat for the very survival of mankind, unless they are contained. My optimism comes from this interview. You see, that's why I have no words to say thank you, because all our interview is beyond Einstein. And so my optimism came because you are not alone. You see, we are invited for a world summit in China. So the academia now, the academia opposing that is krypton Einstein for clearly political interest is now becoming more and more a minority. And in reality, they are now outside real new science. They are totally outside. They live in a world that is gone, surpassed.
That's our best.
Belongs
That's
to the past.
way out, and our only solution is to think outside the Einstein box. Anyway, so Dr. Santilli, it was a real pleasure to have you tonight. It was extremely fascinating, and thank you for all this information. We'll re-invite you another time to develop those last few points that we didn't go into details, but it was a real pleasure to have you, and thank you all. Have a great evening, night. I hope you enjoyed the show, and go look up Dr. Santilli's website. There's lots of information if you want to go into more detailed experiments and discoveries that he mentioned tonight. You'll find out more on his website, and follow his agenda and news updates as well. He's going to be in China soon, and we'll go back to Europe actually also very soon. Thank you, Dr. Santilli, and we'll see you again soon, I hope, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. It has been really a privilege as a scientist. I spent my life in the pursuit of new knowledge. I have no words to say you. Merci beaucoup, thank you, spasiba. Efkalisto.
Grazie mille.
Grazie mille.
Okay, we'll see you soon, guys.
And I wish you the very, very best.
You too. Bye-bye.